Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com. I am your host, Brent Skinner, and I do lots of things here. And I used to say all the things I do here at the intro of these podcast episodes, and I've decided to stop doing that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kelli. You are Kelli Thomason. I just did it. Thomason. Kelli Thomason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I've been around and participated in several HR implementations and tech transitions over the years, so I'm excited to share what I've learned.
Oh yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because there's a lot of wisdom and real important expertise that we'd like to kind of share with the audience. Now, you are senior HR and talent consultant over at 512 Financial, and the working title of our podcast today is From Eye Rolls to High Fives: Winning Change Management for HRIS and Payroll Implementations. I love that title, and we're going to get to that real soon. But what I like to ask all my guests before we get into things is, there's a lot of passion in this space, in the world of work, HCM specifically. And, what gets you motivated every day? What got you into this line of work, Kelli?
Well, I landed in it because I just enjoy helping people. And I know a lot of people say, well, I like helping people, so that's why I do what I do. But it's a combination of not only seeing the positive outcomes and the benefits, the impact of what has been accomplished as a result of, whether it's an implementation of a new system, the time saved, the happy faces when they realize, wow, we don't have to do this mundane thing anymore. It's automatic now. That's what really gets me going. I'm just really passionate about helping people be more efficient in what they're doing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And there is a lot of a need for that in this particular space. There's so much tedium and administrative tedium that just excuse me, takes up so much time for folks, and they're not able to focus on more meaningful, more satisfying, and more important stuff when it comes to these jobs. Let's get into it, because a lot of these implementations, these HRIS implementations, they're not necessarily inspiring unless you have the right kind of leader, like setting the stage and all this kind of stuff, right? It can make a huge difference in terms of the success. So maybe we should start here. When you're starting an HRIS or payroll implementation, how do you quickly identify the worst critic? Because there's always that person, right? What's your first move to bring them into the tent?
First of all, I like to change my mindset, and I like to think of them as the trusted skeptic. So I like to find the person who has maybe been burned before, somebody who maybe isn't as tech savvy as other people on the team, and just identify them and invite them in to the project, ask them to be on the red team, right? Help us find the problems, help us identify the things that are going or could go wrong, things that they maybe, like I said, have been burned with in the past. So that's the first thing I like to do. And just like I said, change that mindset from worst critic to trusted skeptic, because there's always somebody on the team that you notice other people go to when there's something wrong, or if they want to talk to somebody, they have a concern, it seems, and they're not, oftentimes they're not the leader of the unit or the department or whatever. They're a colleague to the team at large, just somebody who's trusted on the team.
There's a term for that that's escaping me at the moment, but there, I'm going to come up with my own term for it. There's a real term for it, like trusted, trusted people on the team, folks they're almost the hidden leaders. They don't,
Right.
it's not really it's not necessarily in their title, but they are, they are the some of them are like the protectors of a vast trove of information, or maybe they have quite a bit of knowledge in something that's absolutely essential for the team to know, like maybe the intranet there at that particular organization or whatever. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really important to bring them into the fold. Don't um, the worst thing would be to sort of view them as an adversary. Instead, say, "Hey, this person has clout and is actually interested in this because they're actually saying things. So why don't we leverage this? Let's make them an ally." I love that. I love that. Um, what are some of the most effective ways to involve staff without letting the project evolve into design by committee?
Well, first of all, put time limits on things, and invite folks to contribute their ideas, their thoughts. Ask questions like, what went wrong before? What would make this worthwhile to you? What is it that you're looking for in this? And then invite those suggestions, the information and what have you, but then time box it. So, we're going to work on, say, the requirements for the next X number of days or weeks or what have you. And we're going to solicit all this information. But then at the end, we're going to come back and we're going to close that loop and we're going to take those suggestions and we're going to decide what can be implemented, what won't be implemented, and why. And that's very important to say the why. And then just what's not going to be implemented right now. What will we consider maybe after the main pieces of the project are complete? We can go back and revisit certain parts. So I think that's really important to time box it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you maybe it? I know I don't want to put you on the spot because you've gone through so many of these. Sometimes you do so much of one thing that you can't think of one example. I that happens to me all the time. Hey, share an example with me, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. But can you share maybe an example of something that was decided not to include, for example, that might have seemed like it, of course we should include that before you actually went through the motions?
We're actually going through a system implementation right now, so I can share something that just happened last week.
Awesome.
So yeah, so we are implementing a new system, and there's one piece that we would love to see go live, right? It would be a huge lift to the team to be able to have this particular feature. However, other features are just more important right now. And as much as we want to do this one thing, we decided as a group, let's revisit that. Let's get past the major pieces of this implementation, and let's not rush that piece because it is so important and will impact our clients. We're going to revisit that after we get the main parts of this new system implemented, and we'll just come back to it later. We're really excited about it, but we don't want to rush it and then, make a mistake and have it not be something that the clients are excited about. We want to have them excited as we are about it.
That makes a lot of sense. When you're working on an HRIS implementation, is there sort of a typical sort of cadence of, here's what we do first in terms of functionality or whatever, and we leave some of this other stuff till later? Is there anything like that?
I try and identify with the team some design principles from the get-go. So let's decide on what are our guiding principles. For example, one might be standardization over customization. Another one might be accuracy over convenience. So we decide on those design principles first, and then that makes it so much easier to make decisions later because your North Star has been established and everybody knows what those North Stars are.
That's it. That's interesting. Accuracy versus convenience. Can you give an example of what one might look like versus the other?
On that one in particular, let me think back to an implementation. Okay, so there's features that make things faster, right? Might make things easier, but they might also cause us to slip up and select a wrong option from the drop down menu. I'll just give that as an example. So while that might be faster, it may cause us to choose something from the drop down menu that isn't going to be accurate in the future. So we just have to be really careful when we're designing so that we are making sure that convenience doesn't trump the accuracy or a compliance issue, the drop down menu versus a checkbox or what have you. Just you have to consider going fast is great, but only if it keeps you accurate.
Yeah, because nobody wants to fall run a field of compliance. That's mission critical. Yeah, and now I understand what you're saying about accuracy versus convenience. There's a level of specificity that might slow you down a little bit, but is going to the increase the chances that you're going to remain compliant or that you're going to be doing the thing that ends up with the outcome that you want. These sorts of things. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Um, in your experience, what does a strong vendor-customer relationship look like during implementation? What are the early warning signs that it's breaking down? What are some of the hallmark sort of indicators that it's going to be a good one?
Well, I love building relationships. That's one reason why I chose a profession, the HR profession. But I also understand that it's a business relationship. So, and you can have both. You can build great relationships and also keep it, tied to the business. So I like to establish early on with the vendor or the partner that I'm working with. What are the guardrails that we're going to work under? For example, if something slips, when do we escalate it? If it happens once, if it happens 3 times, what are we going to agree on? And then establishing those kind of predictable rhythms early on, meeting cadences and deadlines and so forth. And that way, when something goes off the rails a little bit, it's an early warning sign, right? Like, let's say you've always met every Tuesday at 2 p.m. and then all of a sudden your partner is not showing up for the meetings or showing up late for the meetings. Or maybe the implementation team is turning over more than you think it should during the process. So those are all things you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of, and then when you notice something is going awry, if you've built those warm relationships, then it's easier to have the hard conversations when it's necessary. And you just hit the reset button, and go back to your agreed upon guardrails. Hey, this has happened 3 times now. I think we need to bump this up, we need to escalate this or what have you. So having that agreement in the beginning really sets the tone for the relationship.
Do you find and feel that you and in your role are able to maybe influence that relationship to maybe be a better one than it necessarily would not necessarily would be otherwise? Do you feel like you have an impact on these sorts of things?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, I think relationships are key to having these implementations run smoothly and successfully because we're dealing with humans here.
Yeah.
When an implementation goes awry, it's often not because of the build. It's because of the human side, right? The build is very repeatable oftentimes. It's something that is not as dynamic as the human element of the project. So I think that the human relationships are actually the most important part of the implementation process.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree, and I would imagine that you in your role, are able to kind of be almost that mediator between, the vendor and the company that's the organizations that's doing the implementation and maybe sort of enhance and maximize, optimize that relationship in many ways. And I think, that's what's really interesting to me. What would you say to folks that are looking to do a new HRIS implementation and are thinking, you know what, we're just gonna do it go it ourselves. We're gonna just work directly with the vendor and, you know, we're just gonna do it ourselves.
It's certainly an option, all right? And what I like to have folks look at is what are the benefits of having somebody else come in and be my advocate, and be able to have the harder conversations, right? So it reminds me a little bit of my background also includes executive recruiting, and we often negotiate the offers for candidates before they begin with their new employer. We retained search. We offer retained search as well, executive retained search. And so we can be that bad guy so that when everybody comes together on start day, or when everybody comes together when the system is finally implemented, there's been no friction or not as much friction as there would have been if we had not been involved on their behalf. So it kind of lets us be the bad guy in some ways
Yeah.
if needed, and allows them to continue to have that relationship that doesn't include the friction as much as it would have if we were not involved.
I love that. I hadn't thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense, right? To have that third party. So that third party can be the bad guy when there's a bad guy needed. Because sometimes, let's face it, we need a bad guy because we're dealing with humans, right?
Right.
So it can be the bad guy for the implementing organization or for the vendor. Obviously, you're not ultimately the bad guy. Everybody's working together and getting this done, and that's why it works. But that's a really interesting dynamic. I hadn't thought of that. That's super interesting. Um, can you maybe share an example of something that sticks out in your mind from past implementations where, wow, we really rallied the troops here and we made this happen. It just wasn't something that we thought was going to work, and in the end, it did.
I'll share an example, but it's probably very different than what you have in mind. So
Okay,
we had an
that's
implementation.
okay.
We had an implementation a while back that, and it was for our company, um, where we got to 95% implemented and we just stopped. We didn't go through with the implementation. So it was devastating. We had put so much time, energy, effort, and thought into this implementation. However, there was, the strategic. There was a strategic decision that had to be made for the company, and basically, we had to take a hard left. And we went to the vendor. We discussed the needs that we had as a result of this change, and they couldn't meet our needs. So again, we're 95%. We're getting ready to go live. I mean, it's like right at the end. And we had to make the decision to actually pull back and just stop completely. And that was tough. That was really tough because you'd poured your heart and soul into this. And then to have it just completely change literally overnight because of, this strategic business decision that needed to be made. And what I really appreciated about that situation is it could have gotten very very ugly, because all of the, like I said, time and energy that went into this that was just kind of gone overnight. And we ended up parting ways as friends with our partner, with our vendor. Um, However, we saved all of that work that we had done. And years later, we ended up circling back, needing that same type of system again, and we were able to save all of that work, and so when we got to the point the second time, now we benefited from all of those blood, sweat, and tears we had put in earlier, so, it ended up working out in the end, but there was an extended period where we didn't implement, and we had to, regroup a little bit.
That's super interesting, and it just goes to show also, always save your work. And, and nothing is ever all for naught, really, because that's another, I think, silver lining in that story as well. So you guys kind of rallied yourselves later, and, made it happen after all. Um, Really, really interesting. And any closing thoughts, other things you'd like to maybe share with our audience about this kind of thing?
I think it's really important, like we talked about, having those warm relationships. So, have a warm relationship with your internal team, with your partner, your vendor, what have you. Have, a hard process, stick to the process, have, clear decision makers, and then, always follow through and follow up. The folks on the team internally want to understand the whys behind it. And when you can turn your trusted skeptic into your advocate, it usually results in a wonderful implementation and ongoing, just day-to-day work.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's good to know that there's that one sort of silver bullet kind of a tactic that you can use that can really make a huge difference. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the podcast. It's been really illuminating.
Great. I've been happy to be here, happy to share my experiences. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.